1 week into the Gold Zone, a couple days into the off season. Let's talk some backs and going all in. Boys, let's hit it. What is up, boys and girls of Green Bay Packers fandom? It's week 2 of the Gold Zone. It's the off season now. I'm your host. I'm Jacob Westendorf. You can follow me on Twitter at, I'm never good at this. There we go. At Jacob Westendorf. You can follow Jacob Morley at Jacob Morley. Find him. That's my co-host, my partner, my friend. And we've got some exciting news in the pipeline for you guys here. Not quite ready to reveal that just yet, but stay tuned for the next couple of weeks. And we will have something really fun for a lot of you draft nerds that are out and about and like to do things like that. But welcome to the show, Jake. Parent-teacher conferences and in the full swing of the offseason. How does that feel?
Feels right, man. Every year it seems like this is when I get busy with school, coaching, and draft content, baby. I love it. I love this time of year. It's so much fun. And no, I'm not going to say that. I would rather win the Super Bowl. But I think for some of us, we can kind of relate to the fact of like, yes, the season that's why we do it, right? To watch your team win. But dang it, if the offseason can't be a lot of fun if you just let it be.
It is a lot of fun. I want to shout out Big B and, of course, our main homie here, Lambo Labo, in the chat. Lambo, we're going to have to get you on once we get close to the draft. I think you're the only guy I know that has watched every single episode of this show. So welcome to the show, guys. Let's touch briefly on the Super Bowl. The way that I've kind of described it is the Super Bowl was on Sunday. Congratulations to the Rams. The offseason began Monday. Therefore, the Rams' reign as champion is over. But I do want to start, Jake, and I know this has been, it's a Packers related show. However, some of the discourse has surrounded, I'm going to hold you to this, Mr. Labo. So you said you want it on, you can't back out this time. Some of the discourse surrounding the game is my favorite quarterback in the NFL, Matthew Stafford. Mm-hmm. And there has been the discussion of, did he punch his ticket into the Super Bowl? He did. Did he punch his ticket into the Hall of Fame? My theory on it is this is Julian Edelman-esque analysis. Do you guys remember when Julian Edelman won that Super Bowl MVP and everyone's like, oh, Julian Edelman, he's a Hall of Famer. He's clutch as hell. And then you start looking up his resume and you're like, Larry Centers has more yards receiving than Julian Edelman. So Julian Edelman is not a Hall of Famer. As of today, right now, February 16, 2022, Matthew Stafford is not a Hall of Famer. Won Super Bowl. Good for him. He won. He did things I didn't think he would be able to do. Congratulations. No Super Bowl MVPs. No MVPs. No top 3 finishes in the MVP voting. No All-Pros. 1 Pro Bowl, which popularity contest, but Hall of Famers tend to get those votes and they get the benefit of the doubt on those kinds of votes. And it hasn't happened. Richard Sherman brought it up and said, does anybody just get in now? Are we going to put in every quarterback that wins a Super Bowl except for Joe Flacco and Trent Dilfer? My answer right now is that Matthew Stafford still has 5 or 6 years left in his career, most likely, if not more, maybe a little less. And he has time to change that narrative. But for right now, I think we are caught up in the glow of who won the Super Bowl and what that means for everybody and everything like that. Let this thing breathe. Matthew Stafford is not a Hall of Famer. And it's funny to me how some people are saying that game counts as making him one, ignoring the fact that he threw an arm punt against San Francisco that if Gronkowski Tart just catches it, they're not even playing in that game. And there's more questions about whether or not he's a choker. Or in the Super Bowl, if the Bengals maybe give up 5 sacks instead of 7, then the Bengals would have won that Super Bowl because largely of Stafford's poor play in the middle of that game. So I've been talking for 3 minutes to say Matthew Stafford's not a Hall of Famer. Jake, what do you think on this discourse?
I don't think he is, right? I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but man, I think it's closer than what some people are giving him credit for. I mean, I don't want to be the guy that's like, oh yeah, he's in the Hall of Fame. He should be. I mean, no. And the thing is kind of like, I think he's kind of got the Matt Ryan type argument, except Matt Ryan has played on better teams throughout his career. But like when you look at the stats, like, so Matthew Stafford right now as it stands is 12th all time in passing yards. Okay. Guys that are below him in passing yards that are in the Hall of Fame include Warren Moon, Fran Tarkenton, Joe Montana, Johnny Unitas.
Guys
different
that
era.
played in a very different era.
Completely different era. Yes, of course. But he still has just gobs and gobs of yards, passing touchdowns. He is ranked, and I'm looking this up right now in front of me. So I'm kind of building the plane as we go here throughout the air. Passing touchdowns. I'm having to go Control F here to find him, so that might not be a good sign. Stafford. Oh, he's 12th in passing touchdowns as well throughout his career, ahead of John Elway, ahead of a lot of the same guys I just talked about. Again, completely different era. Ahead of Russell Wilson right now. So as far as stats go, I think he can at least have an argument. Now, is it a slam dunk first ballot Hall of Fame because he won a Super Bowl? No, I don't think so. But I think he has helped his cause in that regard. And I think if LA can put a competitive team back together for the next 2-3 years and they can get back to the threshold of Super Bowl champions, then maybe. Is he a Hall of Famer? Maybe. I don't know.
Right now, the answer is not right now.
For you. So if he retired today, right? That's the argument. I would probably lean on the side of no, but I think it's closer for me than some people. And the no All Pro stuff, like he's played. I mean, I don't know. That I'm like building my argument, then also like convincing myself no. That's kind of how close I am, because I want to say like, okay, he doesn't have a bunch of All Pros. Yeah, but he's playing the same era in the NFC as guys like Aaron Rodgers, as guys like who are other stud NFC quarterbacks that I can't like who's been beating him out for.
Well, Tom Brady this past year, Drew Brees for
right. All Pro is the NFL. So yeah, Drew Brees. Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, guys that are going to be Hall of Famers, even like Ben Roethlisberger, going to be a Hall of Famer. So like he's played in an era where he's not ever been like in the top 3 or 4 guys, but he's always been really good. And it will be interesting. So I'll end it with this. It'll be interesting to see how this type of voting goes, because there's a lot of guys from this era of football that are going to be towards the top of passing records and touchdown records that maybe it didn't mean as much as when like Joe Montana played, or obviously Johnny Unitas played. It's so different. It's such a different era of football that isn't just gaudy numbers, because let's not forget the narrative for Matthew Stafford for a long time was very similar to like Kirk Cousins. Hey,
Hadford.
He has been bad the first half, but now they're down 30 points. So he threw out 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in the second half. Like
kind of the narrative that surrounds Phillip Rivers for a lot of people too. And whether that's fair or not, this isn't going to be a debate on that. I think we've spent too much time on Matthew Stafford, which is my own fault to begin with. But
he just won a Super Bowl. We can give him 10 minutes. We can at least give him 10 minutes of our show. He did just win a Super Bowl. So props for that, I guess.
And I wondered how long it would take for this question to be asked. Explain the Eagles hat. Yeah, my dad was an Eagles fan. So definitely still go Pack go. No question about that. But when they're not playing the Packers, yeah, go Birds. Fly Eagles fly. Whatever your go-to saying is. And I want to give a shout out to my guys, Chris Infante and Brian Cameron. Plus, I don't know, man. I don't know what it is. Ever since I've been a kid, the Eagles gear has always been kind of slick. I think that black with that dark green has always looked really nice. I wore my dad's McNabb jersey on Super Bowl Sunday because that was his favorite player forever and ever. So that's the Eagles bit, and I'll wear this pretty often. So get used to it, but I am not an Eagles fan first, a Packers fan first. And that's what we're going to talk about now as I transition into this next part. Now, what we're going to do is kind of talk about last week. We talked about the quarterback situation, and that position's unique, right? Because Green Bay is either going to have Aaron Rodgers, the back-to-back MVP, or Jordan Love, the guy that they traded up for and got in the first round. So their starting quarterback is pretty set in stone. But I do want to go through, and their backup, frankly, I think is pretty set in stone too. Because it's either going to be Jordan Love or Kurt Benkert, and that's the case either way. So let's kind of go through this roster. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, both of them, I think right now are bona fide studs. A.J. Dillon took a step this year, undraftable because he cannot catch passes. I do want to point that out, but it appears he can catch passes. Aaron Jones, obviously, I think he's going to start. It's going to be weird as that contract goes along, and we'll talk a little bit about his contract as we go through here, but that was built like a 2-year deal when it was signed. So it'll be interesting to see if he becomes a cap casualty or somebody they move on from here in 2023 going on like that. But AJ Dillon took a step this year. I mean, he was really close, if not the Packers leading rusher. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but they really did do a good job of using both of those guys. When you draw it up, when God drew it up and he created the game of football and he said thunder and lightning for running backs, these were two guys he had in mind that fit together perfectly. Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw is an example like that. Jones had some time. I know True North Packers fan points out he was relatively healthy. He did miss a game or two with a knee injury. And then they have games where like he's half-assed healthy, where he kind of plays but kind of doesn't. And they kind of lean on A.J. Dillon that way. But you saw, to me, the value this year of having both of those guys in that playoff game. The Packers offense was drastically different after A.J. Dillon exited the game with a broken rib. And they were unable to get a whole lot established on the ground. The Packers ground game this year wasn't as good as it was last year. They had some issues up front that lead into that. But Jake, just talking about these two guys specifically before we get into the back half of that running back room, you got to be really excited about having those guys coming back next year, regardless of who the starting quarterback is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a foundational piece of what Matt LaFleur wants to do with his offense. He wants to be able to run the ball. And we saw it against San Francisco. When you take that away, it can get ugly. It can get sloppy. And the sad thing and the hard thing about it is you draft this hammer of a running back to be able to play in December at Lambeau to close out a game. And it just so happens the Packers' luck is he breaks his ribs on a kick return or a kickoff, whatever it was, something special teams, which we don't even talk about.
I just looked it up.
What's so funny?
I just looked it up. The separation of these players, A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, how many yards do you think separated? A.J. Dillon was the leading rusher for the Packers this season.
I know this. It's 10. It's like within 10 yards. It's like 800.
4 yards, 803 and 799. That is absolutely incredible. Now, granted, to Dillon's credit, he played 17 games and Jones only played 15. So he did miss a couple of games that would have had him over that most likely. But incredible to me that is the case. I'm sorry. I just thought that was hilarious. I didn't know that was the case.
I thought you were laughing at our misfortune for special teams. I was like, how dare you?
Oh, hell, come on, man. The Packers special teams has been shitty for 15 years. Like, I think what was Pack Daddy, Packernet's podcast was talking about how the Packers have one kickoff return for a touchdown since 2002. And the last one before that was in 2000. They had one in 2011. Randall Cobb is the last time they've returned a kickoff. Punt return has been a little bit better because they had Micah Hyde. But obviously, I mean, special teams isn't just the return game. But my goodness, if the Packers, this would be irresponsible. But if they spent a boatload of money on Cordero Patterson and just said, you know what, you're going to be our third running back and you're going to return kickoffs, I'd be like, well, I get it.
I get it. Yeah. Like,
let's Devin Hester's ass off and get him out of retirement.
That is like, it's like bringing a flamethrower to take out, to fix your mouse problem. Right. But I get it. That's where we're at. I'm sick of it.
That's exactly what we do. Because if there's a mouse in my house, we're burning the house down. I've got a story about that. When we've had one mouse in my house since we moved in. I'm knocking on wood. And literally after that, I bought every single mouse preventative, whether electronic, whether steel wool, whether whatever, to keep them out of I am terrified of mice. Don't ask me why. It's been that way since I was probably 5 years old. I will not touch them. And the rule in my house was my wife does not want me to get the snap traps that kill them. So we got the humane traps. And I said, that's fine, but you're getting rid of them. So we've only ever had one to get rid of. But in my house, yeah, if there were more, we just burn it down and move somewhere. Kind of like Ross Uglum with snakes.
Just get a cat.
No, cats are the spawn of Satan.
Mice are cute.
Mice are cute. Good Lord,
mice
come
don't
on,
bother.
Man. No,
Mice don't
that's
bother
fine.
me.
I know they don't bother most people. But let's go to the back half of the room. I've gotten you off track a bunch. So let's go to the back half. Kylan Hill, Patrick Taylor. And we got a point here. Excited about Kylan Hill. I certainly think that there are things there to be excited about. I was in the house for his first touchdown of the preseason against Houston and was like, whoa. I mean, when a player could get me to go wow in the preseason, he's got a little bit of juice. Because obviously there's a lot of replacement level to level players. That was kind of one of my concerns about Amari Rodgers, is he looked whereas Kylan Hill was like, oh, wow, this kid's got some juice. Had some things on a kickoff return this year, and ultimately a bad decision, as pointed out. It said need to make smarter decisions. A bad decision caused an unfortunate injury that then ended his season. Patrick Taylor, who was cut after the preseason, eventually was on the roster for after Kylan Hill was injured through the rest of the regular season. Showed some nice things against Minnesota on the last home game of the regular season. Showed some nice things against Detroit. And to his credit, too, he actually had a couple carries against San Francisco where I was like, okay, don't run the ball because I'm afraid he'll fumble. And he didn't fumble. So good for him on not fumbling that way, because that was a bit of an issue in the preseason. I think he fumbled twice this year in the preseason this year. My question to you now is, when you look at the back half of that room, this is feasibly somebody that could take over for Aaron Jones as soon as 2023, if Jones's contract is in fact a 2-year contract. How confident are you in pairing either one of those guys with A.J. Dillon, should that need to happen?
I mean, I think both those guys are super talented. And I think it's interesting because Kylan Hill is kind of the Aaron Jones light, and Patrick Taylor is kind of the A.J. Dillon light. And they both do a lot of the same stuff the other guy does. They're just younger and haven't proved it as much. Kylan Hill is someone that I think is kind of your shiftier type back. He's an underrated receiver out of the backfield. But ultimately, he was a 7th-round draft pick, and he did just blow his knee up, right? Patrick Taylor, on the other hand, is someone that, and let me just say too, both of these guys move different. And I always like betting on guys that move different. And Patrick Taylor is a guy like that too. If you go back and watch Memphis's tape of him, his sophomore and junior year, this is a guy that I think would have been a potential day 2 draft pick coming out. Yep. And that is with guys like D'Angelo Henderson, the kid in Philadelphia, right? Kenny Gainwell.
Who's the other one? Antonio Gibson.
Tony Pollard was in that backfield.
Holy shit. Is Memphis running back you? Apologies to Wisconsin.
They were loaded. And all of those guys have had different levels of success in the NFL. And all of them have looked promising in the NFL. And I think Patrick Taylor, given the opportunity, could be very much in the same mold. He was their second leading rusher of guys in that group. I mean, a guy that this guy can catch the ball out of the backfield. Like he's a talented, multifaceted running back. And when I talk about him, it's because when I watched him, I was excited. And what the Packers did with him and why he wasn't drafted is because he had the foot injury. And they basically knew that happened later on in his career. And a lot of people, one knock against running backs already is that they're a running back. And if you can't come in and contribute immediately, that's a huge knock on your draft stock. Like if you're going to draft a running back, unless you're the Packers, apparently with A.J. Dillon, like they want you to play right away. And so Patrick Taylor falls out of the draft. The Packers just so happen to have Dr. Anderson in Green Bay, who is the best foot doctor in the world. And so they're like, hey, we're going to take this guy who's got this foot stuff because the guy that we have doing foot surgeries, that's doing ortho stuff on guys from all over the country says that he's going to be all right, that this injury is going to heal well. I think they really might have something with Patrick Taylor. So as of right now, today, the same thing with Stafford. As of right now, today, not knowing anything, not having any update on Kylan Hill's pretty bad knee injury. I would bank on Patrick Taylor being the guy that you're going to pair with AJ Dillon. They do have a little bit similar of a skill set, but if that skill set is gaining yards, then I'm fine with that, right? So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I'm super excited that the Packers are potentially very good 4 deep on this roster.
That there. One question I do want to address: True North Packers fan, will Jones be back for 2022? Contract designed to be team friendly. Gave him a chance to move on. Here's the deal. That contract is very friendly in terms of them being able to push money out, restructure, and they will likely do that to save money in the event that Aaron Rodgers is returning. What's going to happen if Aaron Rodgers is traded? I think then some of those questions of will we even bother restructuring those guys, or will they just kind of move on? I certainly think that's possible. I do think Aaron Jones is part of the plan for 2022, regardless of who their starting quarterback is in 2022. But I do think that it could be his last year in Green Bay.
I think it will be too. I mean, when he signed that deal, it was essentially a 2-year deal. I wouldn't be surprised though, Jacob, if they reworked his deal to make it more palatable for this season. But yeah, I don't know. He just signed it last year, but I know that's kind of been like it's something that hasn't really been discussed. But when you go look at it, there are ways you can lighten his cap hit this year too. And that's the thing, guys. We don't know Russ Ball. We are not in those conversational meetings, right, where they're talking about contracts and they're talking about, hey, and anybody that's ever had a job, like you know the deal. When Aaron Jones signed that contract, he knew the deal. If we are sitting here in our chairs saying this looks like a 2-year deal, Aaron Jones knows that too, right?
Yep.
We are not privy to the types of conversations that they are having with Aaron Jones before he signs it. Aaron, this is a 2-year deal. We might come back to you next year and ask you to rework that. Are you okay with that if that's something that we have to do? Because look at XYZ next year. And if you want to be on this team next year and you want it to be successful, this might be something we have to do. How do you feel about that, Aaron? I'm down with that. I would do that. Okay, like stuff like that. None of us are privy to any of those conversations. And I get that is completely an oversimplification of what's going on. But in some ways, it really isn't. Because if we're not in those meetings when those guys sign those contracts, we really just don't know, right? And who's willing to work with them and who is not willing to work with them. So sorry to get off on a tangent and a rant and a little bit of a rant there, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jones has his deal reworked this season.
Certainly feels like that'll be something.
But he's gonna be on the team next year. Like let's be real about that. He's gonna be the starting running back for this team next year.
Yeah, he'll be on the team. There are other contracts that are simple like that. Kenny Clark is one. David Bakhtiari is one, and we've talked about those. And we'll talk more about some of that stuff because there's going to be some detail as to what the deal is with Aaron Rodgers, what the deal is with Devontae Adams, and how all of that is going to work. Big B, I'm never going to really shout out against anything that's pro Jamal Williams. So, that's my guy. Maybe that's not quite like as your guy, but
so on brand. That's so on brand too. I love that.
Wow, Jamal's my dude, and I can tell you that there are certain guys that I'm just going to be irrational about when they become free agents. Mike Daniels is one of them, and Jamal Williams is one too. I know Green Bay doesn't quote unquote need him, but if he wanted to come back, I'm not going to.
I might need him.
Right? Why not?
You might need him. We know Big B needs him. So
exactly,
Brian, if you're listening, if you went and got Cobb for Rodgers, why can't you go get Jamal for us? I don't really see what the difference is.
It's about the people, and we three kings are in fact people. So I would think that's something that should be listened to. Before we get to the draft class, specifically about this running back group, I did want to talk and touch base with you real quick. And we did talk about this Monday on the Pack-A-Day podcast. Morley and I practically live together at this point. I think my wife and his fiance are starting to ask questions in terms of how much time we spend together. But whatever. Aaron Rodgers, the Packers are talking about offering an extension upwards of $45 million. Devontae Adams, they're talking about franchise tagging and trying to get a deal done. If they get Rodgers an extension, I think it's very likely they will get one done with Adams as well. Here's kind of my thing, because I don't want to go over, we talked about last week, like what their plan is, and I think it's kind of foolish to rehash. Clearly, Green Bay wants him back. And I think coming to a different conclusion is either being stuck in your own priors or just not reading what's going on. I don't know another way really to put that. But what I do want to talk about is from the standpoint of building the team from there. And we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday morning's episode of the Pack-A-Day podcast. I believe something I tweeted yesterday was when Tom Brady had said that football is better when Rob Gronkowski is in it, and he hopes Gronk continues to play even though he hasn't. And my response was, how about a number 12 that also needs a tight end? And I don't necessarily mean Gronkowski specifically when I start talking about this, but I do think if the Packers are going to put all of their eggs into this basket, it's Aaron Rodgers and it's Devontae Adams, and it's basically 2, maybe 3 years. We'll kind of see once the extension details come out, if they ever do, in fact, come out. Then I think what the Packers should be doing is, and the example I used was Josiah DeGuara, and I'm not hating on Josiah DeGuara. I like him. I think he's a good football player. But I think they also asked him to do some things that he's not necessarily best suited to do at this stage of his career, being the seam stretching type of tight end. He's not a seam stretcher. He's an in the flat, intermediate type of guy. He's going to knock your face off when he blocks you, and he's going to make some plays, as a check down type receiver, has a little bit of wiggle. You saw that on that screen pass that he took for a touchdown from Jordan Love, the longest touchdown pass of Jordan Love's career, by the way, which he threw all of 2 yards. So I guess that's a little misleading, but whatever. It goes in the box score as a 60-yard touchdown. We'll take it. My thing is, when the way you build this team is any veteran you can think of. If it comes down to it, well, should we rely on this young player or should we get the proven commodity? More often than not, the Packers' answer in recent memory has been, let the young player develop. Let's see what he's got. I also think now, if that's the way they're going to go, the veteran should be the answer. The example I gave was Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram is a player that was allegedly on the trading block, and the Packers may or may not have wanted to give up a 3rd-round pick for him. If you're doing this all-in thing, then you need to be all-in on the all-in. Trade for that guy, because that 3rd-round pick is not going to matter to you by the end of this deal, because by the time he's ready to go, it's when this Rodgers thing is done, and the team's going to look drastically different anyways. So I'm not saying they haven't been aggressive enough. I'm not even advocating doing the Los Angeles Rams thing. This is not what that is. But be a little more willing to maybe go beyond what your comfort level is. Don't haggle as much over the price. Like if somebody says, hey, we've agreed to a 4th. Well, we want a 3rd. Give the 3rd. Your 3rd-round picks suck anyways. So just give the 3rd. And that's how I think they should build this team if they are going to do the Aaron Rodgers thing for the next couple of years. Any available veteran that is willing to come to Green Bay, whether at a discount or if you got to be a little more aggressive, if you can, and do some stuff like that, do it. The Whitney Merciless signings, the Rasul Douglas signings, those are all well and good, but I think they need to be willing to do even more of those things if they're going to go this direction as much as they can, because like you mentioned, I don't know what they can and cannot do. People have talked about the Odell Beckham thing since he won a Super Bowl in Los Angeles. Sounds to me like it wasn't really between Green Bay and Los Angeles as it has been speculated. It sounded like New England when Odell was talking about it during Super Bowl week, but that's beside the point. I think the Packers need to be a little more willing to do some stuff like that. I'm not saying even go full Kansas City Chiefs and not worry about character stuff at all. I'm just saying kind of when it comes to a guy who's available, maybe Robbie Anderson is an example. Could they have given a 3rd-round pick for him or something like that? And this is a good question. You could certainly go this route too, Joe. It depends on the veteran, and it does. They've tried the washed-up vet before and ended up with Jimmy Graham and Martellus Bennett. That is true. Mm-hmm. That being said, Rob Gronkowski is different than Jimmy Graham and Martellus Bennett from the standpoint of, one, nobody saw Martellus Bennett becoming a bum, to use Aaron Rodgers' words. And Jimmy Graham, we kind of know the deal. Like, we knew he was washed when the Packers signed him. You were just kind of hoping Aaron Rodgers could reinvigorate him a little bit. Rob Gronkowski would be different. He's a Hall of Famer, arguably the greatest tight end to ever play the sport, and gives you, at minimum, a dominant run blocking presence that also has the ability to be a really good player in the red zone for you, somewhere that the Packers struggled this year. Now, maybe the tight end that they get is just Robert Tonyan, and I would be down with that. I do think they need to address that position. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. But in terms of team building, Morley, what are your thoughts on, if the Packers are going to go this route, do you think that there is room for them, or should they be willing to be more aggressive on guys that maybe they don't know, to use Ted Thompson's words?
Yeah, they should. I mean, David Schultz, in a perfect world, bring me him, but he's going to get paid more than what the Packers are going to have. But yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily know who that veteran tight end is. Like it. I mean, a lot of the guys, and you have to like pair them with who they have. Like, are they better than Mercedes? Are they better than what Tanyan's going to be? They're going to know where Tanyan is more than any of us do. So I would say yes, explore that. I just don't know if that specific position is going to have that guy readily available for you, and I think it's going to come through the draft. I think in a perfect team building type
Trey
perspective,
McBride,
like Trey McBride or Ruckert
Jeremy
is
Ruckert.
both those guys would be very welcome additions, in my opinion. So Jake Ferguson, yeah, why not? Give me the Jake Ferguson too.
I like
Kid
him.
from UCLA, Delolik. I can't say his name, but I like him.
Isaiah Likely, I like him.
Isaiah
too.
Likely.
And just to be clear, I'm not just talking tight ends either. Like if Akeem Hicks wants to come play for the Packers,
if
it's Akeem Hicks or a second round pick, that
would be
Hicks.
That would be more likely too, because a lot of times you see those veteran guys that are within the division kind of jump over because they're like, "Hey, I've been playing you twice a year for a few years. I want to drink out of that. I want to drink out of that Gatorade bottle." So, yeah, I think they should be more willing. I think they proved last year they are more willing to do that with some of these guys and kind of bring guys in and go after guys. It didn't always come to fruition with this team, but I do think that they were in every single conversation with those guys. We forget Stefan Gilmore was the guy that everybody was hot to trot for, and that's the same day they signed Rasul Douglas, and Rasul ended up being everything you would have wanted Gilmore to be and more. So it just, you get lucky sometimes, and I don't know. We'll see. We will see. That's why this offseason is going to be very fascinating.
So here's the thing I want to get, because I've gotten two of them right in a row. And we will talk receivers next week. And trust me, that'll be a longer show because there's a lot that goes into that.
It's going to be a fun one.
It will be. And we're working on one, maybe two guests for that. So you'll definitely want to check us out next week at 7:00 right here on Game On Wisconsin's YouTube channel. Hit like, subscribe, all that sort of fun stuff to get going here. What I will say about receivers, and I don't want to get too deep into that, is that I think the Packers have taken it. Like, I know we all know this by now. Ian Rappaport has talked about it. When they picked Jordan Love, they were trying to trade up and get Justin Jefferson. My thing that I would say for the Packers now is if that draft was this year and say they wanted, your 1 and your 2, then do it. Then do it. I understand why they didn't do that 2 years ago, because if you're picking Jordan Love, then you kind of know how they felt about their quarterback situation at the time. But be willing to do some stuff like that. Or maybe it's trading one of those top picks for, a proven veteran. And I'm not saying trade a first or 2 firsts even for a receiver. We'll talk more about my receiver philosophy next week, but just stuff kind of like that in general. Consistent tight ends, D-line help. Those are all things that we can do when we start talking about team needs and everything like that. And those are certainly things that are on the list. But this show is about the running backs. So let's talk about the backs that are in this class, Jake. We've finally gotten to that point. Running backs don't matter is the common discussion. I do not believe that. I think that's an oversimplification of the position, but I also would say that doesn't mean you pick one in the top 5 either. But if Green Bay took a guy at 28 and I told you he was going to be Jonathan Taylor, aren't you going to tell me, hell yeah, I would do that? I think that there's a lot of different, things the Packers can do this year. I would tell you there isn't a back in this class that you're going to want to take that early. There were some examples in the past. I know when I was legitimately heartbroken when the Packers were in that draft where they took A.J. Dillon, and like 5 picks prior, the Ravens took J.K. Dobbins. I loved J.K. Dobbins. I loved Jonathan Taylor that year. I loved a lot of backs that year. Dillon was one of them. But I do think this year, when you talk about backs that the Packers need, and there is a discussion to be had, Kylan Hill, Patrick Taylor, but when you look at this as far as potential Aaron Jones replacement in 2023, for starters, my joke that I've been making is in the 3rd round, just pick a running back, because it's really hard for those running backs to flame out. And my first question that I've gotten on the board here is from Lambo Labo about Hassan Haskins. So let me talk about Hassan Haskins. Hassan Haskins should have a statue built outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan, in front of the stadium for 5 touchdowns against that poverty school from Columbus, Ohio. God bless him for single-handedly outscoring the Ohio State Suckeyes and then beating up on the Iowa Hawkeyes a week later. It was phenomenal. I love Hassan Haskins. And I do think that's somebody that if you get him on day 3, even if that's like the 4th round, he kind of reminds me, and this isn't a direct comparison, but kind of reminds me of Jamal Williams from the standpoint of he's going to be good at everything, but not great at anything. Can he grind out 4 or 5 yards at a time? Yes. Can he pop an explosive run every now and again? Yes. Is he adept in the passing game? Yes. And that's the kind of backs that I'm looking for if you look at Green Bay. With the Packers specifically, something about their running backs that I've talked about is they don't have natural pass catchers. What I mean by that, every time Aaron Jones has to catch a pass, he has to catch a pass a certain way. His hands have to be up. That play right before halftime against San Francisco is a really good example of that, where Rodgers, like people are saying, Rodgers didn't put it out in front of him. My theory on it is, one, it's a perfect ball. Two, I think that's the way Rodgers has to throw that because he knows his guy. If Jones has to catch it over the shoulder, he's not going to, or it's going to be more difficult for him to do so. I just haven't seen him do it a whole hell of a lot. I know he had a big touchdown.
Remember the wheel route that we all wanted and all needed that was perfect, and it hit him right in the breadbasket like so, and then it somehow hit the ground. Yeah.
Yes, there are examples of that. So when I talk about the Packers and needing a running back, those are the kinds of guys that I'm looking for help as soon as 2022 and even in the future. And A.J. Dillon is even kind of that way. He's not a natural player in the passing game. If you have to stop to catch the ball, basically is what I mean by a non-natural player. Now, granted, running backs aren't receivers, and there's a reason for that, and I understand all that. They're capable pass catchers, both of those guys. But there are plenty of guys I like that way. So that's kind of what I'm looking for when you talk about a running back for the Packers this year. Jake, if you're looking for a back, and I'm not talking specific names yet, we will get to that. What are some types of players that you're looking for Green Bay to add?
Right. And I think with both those guys, they're not supernatural route runners either, as far as running backs. Like with AJ Dillon, like the whole he can't catch stuff was super overblown. But also with AJ Dillon, he's not a guy I want out there running like a full route tree. He's a guy I want in the flats that can catch the ball and then just kill people. You know, like that's the type of running back he is. But like if they're going to draft a guy, it is a guy that I want to be able to like, hey, let's kick him out to the slot because he can actually run. He can run a legit slant route. He can run a legit whip route. Like, let's get a guy that can add that dimension to the offense, that can do some stuff that really no one on the roster right now can do. Because Kylan Hill can't really do that, and Taylor can't really do that either. So that would be the type of guy that I would want on this team. And in some ways, maybe that's Amari Rodgers if they don't get that guy. But Amari Rodgers hasn't really done anything to make me excited about anything for his future, aside from maybe losing 15 pounds and trying to be more explosive. I don't know, but those would be the types of guys that I would go for.
At 220 pounds. I need to know.
Not me. He looks big. He looked big. Like he looked like a guy trying to play running back. You know, like 3 yards in a cloud of dust type running back. But it is interesting too because I think you would say we just talked about all 4 of these guys that they have on this roster. And it's like, dude, running back is a position they don't even need to scout this year. Like, don't do it. They don't need to. They don't need one. But one thing that sticks out in my mind is us thinking that 2 years ago with Jamal and Aaron Jones and Coach LaFleur saying we would like to add another guy to the room, and all of us kind of like, what? Why? You have 2. That's because they're always going to be looking for guys to tote the rock. Like that's how this offense is built. Like LaFleur wants 3 or 4 guys. And if there's someone sitting there around 3 or 4 that they absolutely love, they're going to take them. You know, they're just going to do it. They don't care what we think. And they're going to say, yeah.
Too, something else that I think of when you talk about those 3 or 4 guys is look how much the Packers run those 2-back sets and how they're like when Dillon leaves the game this year, they're not able to do it because they don't trust Patrick Taylor to do that kind of stuff. So having another capable player like that is something that I think would be beneficial, even if it is in fact a luxury. But that's just something that I think matters.
And to talk earlier, what we were talking about earlier, this is probably Aaron Jones' last year as a Packer, right? If it is a 2-year deal, so you're probably looking more towards the future of us saying like, okay, we like Hill, we like Taylor, but if we love this guy, that's who we want to pair with AJ Dillon in 2023. That's going to be our number 2 back while AJ Dillon takes the reins as RB1. So one of those guys could absolutely be Patrick Taylor or Kylan Hill, right? It could totally in 2023, it could be AJ Dillon, Kylan Hill, Patrick Taylor, and those guys could get better, they could improve, and that could be a really good stable of backs. But they could love a guy like we're not mentioning names yet, right? So I'm not going to mention them.
Feel free.
So they could add like a James Cook to this backfield.
Yes.
A guy that basically everything I've just talked about as far as being a route runner, a receiver, a fast guy, a walking touchdown. That is a guy like if James Cook is sitting there in round 3, take him. I would take him right
without
there
even thinking about it. Pick him.
And he's a smaller back, right? He's like 190, 195, but it doesn't really matter for how you're going to play him. And especially if he's going to be your 190, 195 guy playing behind AJ Dillon, that is fine because you're going to I would imagine when AJ Dillon takes over as RB1, it's not going to maybe be as much of a 50-50 time split because he's more of like that workhorse type back that they could get away with a guy like James Cook who's lined up in the backfield lined up in the backfield with AJ Dillon and then put Cook in the slot. And he's a legitimate slot receiver. Like the guy has a wide receiver background. And so adding a guy like that to this team, like that is by far and away my favorite running back for this team. And there are other guys that I like as well, but they're more like your traditional type running backs that I would kind of be like, okay, cool. He's good, but what does he add to this team? So when you're looking at a guy that can specifically add things to this team, add a dynamic or add a wrinkle to this offense, dude, James Cook has got to be number 1 on my list.
So one bit here that we didn't we kind of mentioned it earlier, but that is something. How is Kylan Hill's knee? And Kylan Hill, remember, we loved him. And that was one of my favorite picks of last year's draft. Still a 7th round pick, a 250-ish pick that tore his ACL. And sometimes that means the end of those guys' careers. And I know that's kind of an icky way to think about that, but it's true. It can certainly be that way. James Cook gives you so much value for a couple of reasons. Number one, Minnesota Vikings fans. What's up, motherfuckers? Baby Dalvin Cook. And I would love, if nothing else, to troll these guys that we've got little Dalvin and he ends up better than Dalvin. That won't happen.
God, that would be something.
That would be so sick. But like you mentioned, Baby Dalvin, James Cook, was really good in the college football playoff, and he played 2 really good defenses when he did that. Alabama, obviously, and Michigan had a good defense as well. He torched them. Like over-the-shoulder catches as a running back. Natural route runner. He can run those Texas routes. He can run those routes from the slot that they like to do with Aaron Jones, but it'll be a little more natural from the standpoint if he catches it, he can house it because he's not going to double catch it or he's not going to have to slow down and make sure he caught it kind of thing. James Cook, to me, would be an incredible addition to this team. Like I told you, if they pick him in the 3rd round, for me, number 1, just pick a running back in the 3rd round anyways. I just want to see a 3rd round pick that doesn't suck. And shout out to my man's Jay Sternberger. It didn't work out in Green Bay. I love you so much, Jace. But yeah, it didn't work out in Green Bay. And you talk about like the best 3rd round pick the Packers have made in recent memory is Josiah DeGuara. With all due respect to Josiah, that's not what you're hoping for when you're talking about top 100 picks. So when you look at it that way, I think guys like that are certainly in the discussion. Some other guys that I really like, I love Breece Hall out of Iowa State, and he's young, and he's somebody that as soon that'll never not make me laugh, but
he's young.
But when it comes to Breece Hall, like again, if there's a player, if I'm watching the running back and they make a play, like vision is one of my number 1 things that I'm looking for. It's why I liked Aaron Jones as much as I did early in his career, because they see holes that are there and they close in a blink, and you have to be able to get there in a blink, and they're able to do things like that. So I think that Breece Hall is somebody that can do some stuff like that. There are other guys that I like through there. Jerome Ford is a later round guy. Kyron Williams out of Notre Dame is a later guy. I know you mentioned at the top, Isaiah Spiller. Labo was asking about Rashad White. The thing about running backs is this is where people are like, oh, running backs don't matter. You can just get one later in the draft. It's because there's so much value on those guys on day 3 to where you can pick this guy and he becomes a starter, or he becomes a high level backup where he's basically a starter. And Tyler Goodson's another one. I'm not discounting him either, Joe. So don't worry about that. And Iowa running backs have been Akram Wadley was one that I really liked in the recent past of guys that can just kind of do it all. And, that's where you talk about some of these guys and their ability to come in. I think that one thing they should certainly be doing with the running back position is taking a guy a little bit later every single year and just adding to that stable. Because like you mentioned, Kylan Hill, knee injury, Patrick Taylor, serious foot injury. Those guys are one nick injury ouchie away from their NFL careers being over. And I know that sounds gross to say it that way, but it just is true. And you're talking about
And
potential those replacements.
and for the way Hill plays, like I'll be interested to see how he is coming back from that, because he is kind of that shifty type guy that has the speed, has the wiggle, and like sometimes an ACL injury can rob you of that. And he really depends on that to be able to run the ball. So I hope he comes back healthy, because he looked like he looked like everything we thought he would be coming out of Mississippi State, and that was so much fun in the preseason just to be like, what? Why did you let this happen, NFL? Why did you let this guy almost go undrafted? He's a stud. And then, of course, he got hurt. So hopefully he can get back to form, which it is 2022. A lot of hope for guys with those types of injuries to be able to come back and be better than they were. So we will see. Country ass.
So let's start talking a little bit as we get to the end here. What do you think the likelihood is that the Packers take a running back? And normally I say this is a 5-round draft, but we have to go with the whole thing because of the running back position and the way that it is. What do you think the likelihood is that they take a back in this draft?
Less than 10%. Like,
really?
I'd be surprised. I'd be really surprised if they did. Yeah.
I wouldn't. I would say I think it's like 40% just because of the way LaFleur likes to play with his offense. And you could see very clearly.
Talk to me after they get their comp picks as well. How many picks are we going to end up working with here?
And free agency potentially. I mean, what if they just sign an heir back? I mean, I'm not saying that they'll do that, but it is possible. If you get a guy like Giovanni Bernard, like the way the Bucs tried to use him or somebody like that, I think that's possible as well. But I do think it's higher because I think you've seen the way that LaFleur likes to run his offense. He likes those 2-back sets, and I do too. I love them. I love the way the Packers use that pony package, and he wants to. When he says 3 capable guys of toting the rock, I think he literally means guys that he could line up and, hey, the game plan today is around you. And kind of like they did in that Titans game a couple years ago where A.J. Dillon was an unknown relatively at the time, and Jamal Williams was out, and Aaron Jones was kind of nicked up, and they built that entire thing out of the A.J. Dillon box, and they just kind of ran it down the Titans' throat.
What is interesting about that, too, is he's always been that way, and he's always talked about that, but he's only ever played 2 guys. So like...
Yeah, but have they ever had 3 guys that you think are capable at the same exact time? Like, how they feel about younger guys.
I thought Dillon could have played his rookie year a little bit more, because even when Jamal came back, it was back to kind of A.J. Dillon to the bench. Even
except
after
in the playoffs, Dillon had more run in the postseason than Jamal did, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, that could be the interesting part of it. And if they like Taylor and if they like Hill, they could say we love Jones and Dillon, and we really like these 2 guys as our third back, and hopefully we can stash one on the practice squad again. There's 4 guys we really like, or they just add another guy to the mix. But I think for me, it would have to be like, man, we love this running back. He is by far and away the number 1 guy on our board right now. We just can't not take him. That's what it would have to be. And the chances of that happening, maybe a little bit higher than 10, because running back is so devalued, and Green Bay doesn't devalue the running back position. So that could happen. That absolutely could happen, where teams are like, we'll wait on it. And Green Bay's like, nah, this guy's too good. We're just going to take him. So, yeah, let's say 25%. 25%.
Something else I do want to bring up is, and it's a role they didn't really use last year because of a lot of different things, the offensive linemen, all that kind of stuff that they had happen, but the Tyler Ervin role. And it's hard to do the Tyler Ervin stuff when you have your guys in the shotgun a vast majority of the time, instead of being able to run those jet sweeps and stuff like that. So maybe they have a back that they want, because they did keep 4 on the roster if you call Ervin a running back that particular year, with the way to do some. And the other thing, like you mentioned before, is what if he says, hey, this guy's what if Rich Bisaccia says this guy's my kickoff and my punt returner? That's certainly a possibility as well. And the Packers, to me right now,
James Cook.
And the Packers right now, to me, don't have a guy on their roster that you have to be like, oh, this guy is our set-in kickoff and punt returner for next year, because I wouldn't be counting on Amari Rodgers for anything like that for 2022. So we are out of time. We ran a little bit longer on this show than I anticipated doing it, but I appreciate you guys stopping in. New York, good Lord, True North Packers fan, Iowa Joe, Lambo Labo, and of course, Big B that was in here earlier talking a little bit about some Jamal Williams, which is always welcome at Game On Wisconsin. He's forever a friend of this program. And there you have it, guys. Draft James Cook. So, Goody, if you're listening, and I'm sure you are, the pick is in. James Cook is the Packers' 3rd-round pick this year. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back next week to talk about the wide receiver position. So I'm sure we're going to have a little bit of uptick, talk about the way the Packers have or haven't addressed that position. But until then, I'm Jacob Westendorf. He's Jacob Morley. We will see you guys next week. Go Pack.